Just about everyone in the Untitled Goose Game speedrunning community agrees that the trick with the absolute best name is Geesus. However, as you can see, it's not entirely consistent. There are three main ways to perform it. There's the original traditional method, which is terrible. There's my method, which is extremely good. See? And then there's the new and improved method that I'm not very good at. All of these techniques were designed to skip this kind of annoying walk around, where you have to cross the bridge and then end up at the pub wall at kind of an awkward angle. Now, when I'm attempting any percent speedruns, I use Squid Geesus, because I think it saves a lot of time and doesn't normally lose me very much time. It also puts me in a really good spot to perform arrow clip. Get out of my way, old man. However, when WDN set the Huny percent world record, he used this strat because it's like way more consistent, like absurdly consistent. But if I want to beat WDN, I need to save as much time as possible. And Geesus is pretty obviously one of the easiest places for me to save that time if I can pull it off. But that's a pretty big if. And to be honest, the only reason I'm even attempting this is because I have a trick up my sleeve. Recently, I discovered a trick that actually makes Geesus way more consistent than it used to be. As you're approaching, you can kind of push off like this, and as long as you line up the arch of your neck with the O and U in house like this, you're almost always in the right spot to perform Geesus, as I just did there. With this strat, I think it's possible to make Geesus consistent enough to use in Huny percent. But to be sure, we're going to have to do some math. So without further ado, let's science this. Take me higher, lift me higher with your speed. I need fire. Oh, sorry about that, got a little carried away there. Okay, so now let me explain the data I collected. I accidentally only did bridge 19 times. I was planning to do it 20. Oh well. I ended up performing Squid Geesus about 21 times. I cut out the last 2 times, both of them were 9 seconds, so just know that. I could have cut out the first 3 because honestly, these kind of sucked, but I wanted to get more data with mistakes. But as you can see, especially from these graphs here, the bridge strat is just absolutely insanely consistent. Like when I was doing the math, I genuinely could not believe just how consistent this is. Almost every single run I calculated ended up being about 11 seconds, 0.6. And if it wasn't, it was only give or take like a tenth of a second, which is absolutely bonkers. Like, I cannot believe how consistent this strat is. And keep in mind, I was both clipping onto the rock and running around the rock, and that almost never made a difference. So that clip onto the rock strat is completely useless. If I do bridge, I don't have to do it. At the same time, my strat lining up Lucy's head and neck with the OUS of house, it worked pretty much every time. The only times it didn't work were when I messed it up. Now, one kind of weird thing about that strat that I noticed, especially in all of these runs, is that with traditional Squid Geesus, the head kind of shoots up at a 90-degree angle, but you don't really get that visual cue with this strat for some reason. I don't really know why, it's just kind of a quirk. So you kind of have to know the timing of when you normally would regrab, and just regrab whether you see the visual cue or not. So just going into a little bit more specific data analysis, we can safely say that the average time for bridge is about 11.6 seconds. With Squid Geesus, when it was performed correctly, we normally got these 9.3 second times, give or take about 0.3 of a second. And if we messed up once, we normally got these 10-second times. So it's pretty clear that as long as we only make one mistake, Squid Geesus is faster than the bridge strat. However, one of the main issues that I noticed is that there's no way to reliably line up the boot after a mistake. So if I messed up the first attempt, I would have to just kind of wing it like I normally would. And now that's not always a problem because, again, I have just an absurd amount of experience performing Squid Geesus. I'm normally pretty good at it. But on those rare occasions where both my first and second attempts messed up, it got a little hard, and I was losing like kind of an absurd amount of time, for example, in these runs. And now knowing that those runs aren't very common does kind of help. Usually I was just getting through on the first try, and especially closer to the end, I was getting through first try more often than not. So I think if I was running behind during a world record attempt, I could definitely perform Geesus as a way to kind of speed up my strat. However, honestly, unless I can't find a time save anywhere else, I'm probably going to perform Bridge, just because look at this graph. It is basically a straight line. Even when you don't have the optimal pathing, you're only losing like a third of a second. Whereas with Squid Geesus, this looks like a mountain range. Like, there is no way you can call this consistent. And I kind of knew that going into this, but honestly, it is kind of interesting that the average across all of those runs is still lower than Bridge. So in theory, as long as I perform Geesus correctly 3 times for every 1 time I mess it up, I'm not going to lose much time. So Squid Geesus is still entirely viable, which is kind of cool. That means whether or not I end up performing it is straight up going to come down entirely to whether or not I can find time elsewhere. Like, if I have to perform Plate Clip and my old man strats end up being really, really bad, I'll probably perform Geesus because, again, even if I mess it up, on average, I'm still going to be saving time. And also, it'll just make the run a little cooler. However, these 16 seconds kind of make me nervous. So I'm thinking that what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform Geesus at the start of the run, and if I keep messing it up over and over and over again, I'm just going to switch to the Bridge strat. But if I'm consistently getting it in almost every attempt, I'm just going to keep doing that. So I guess my plan, just to put it into words, is going to be to perform Geesus until Geesus betrays me. Like, if Geesus just isn't working out that day, I'm going to switch to Bridge, and I'm not going to feel too bad about it. So yeah, just to conclude, I'm not really sure whether or not I'm going to perform Geesus. It kind of depends on whether or not the other time saves I have in mind end up working. So yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, and subscribe for more Untitled Goose Game lab reports.